Hey guys, Mr. Pokke here, back with another video. Welcome to another episode of CN Hypewatch, where we will be going through the CN community's opinions for an upcoming banner unit, this time featuring Jingliu. These are strictly speculations from the CN perspective, talking about Jingliu's kit, and it is all based on the livestream event. If you guys would like CN's pooling opinion for version 1.4, kindly check out my previous video on Jingliu/Topaz pooling opinion. Now, being the first limited 5-star Ice Destruction unit, Jingliu is yet another DPS character who enhances his own attacks by entering into the Spectral Transmigration state, which is basically an enhanced state similar to Blade's enhanced state. Utilizing her unique mechanics such as draining her team's HP for an attack percentage increase and proper timing of her Spectral Transmigration state will be crucial in bringing out Jingliu's damage capabilities. As mentioned in my previous CN Hypewatch, I'm not here to discredit any other content creators since their opinions stems from a perspective that holds their own logic and reasoning. This series is not intended to be a guide, and for that, please kindly wait for my CN unit analysis, which is going to be coming in the next few days. These are purely opinions and speculations on the future units based on the livestream event. And with that out of the way, let's just jump straight into today's content. With regards to Jingliu's individual speculations, one of the biggest questions on everyone's minds is how does she fare compared to other DPS units, especially destruction units like Blade and Imbibsa Lunae. For the past couple of patches since version 1.0, we have had a lot of different DPS units coming out. So does Jingliu really hold her value, especially when compared to the previous DPS units? While I can't disclose her actual performance and numbers before her release, things are looking very promising for her. So let's just take this as an example. If Imbibsa Lunae went all in on burst damage like an assassin and Blade went all in on sustained damage like a bruiser, then Jingliu is pretty much in the middle between these three carries. Now, in the CN community's opinion, Jingliu's damage floor, which is the lowest damage possible, it is considerably higher than other carries due to her innate buff mechanics that can increase her own damage output without relying too much on supports. Similar to how Clara and Blade can deal substantial damage even without relying on multiple supports, and for Jingliu, she basically took this to the next level. She has effect resistance to reduce the crowd control probability, action value advance, out damage increase, no skill point consumption during the enhanced stage, as well as a self-attack percentage buff based on the team-wide's HP drain. So because of all these factors, she really can deal quite a high amount of damage without relying on anyone else to buff her up. However, on the other hand, Jingliu's damage ceiling, which is basically the highest damage possible, could also be argued as lower than some of the traditional DPSs, most notably when compared to Imbibsa Lunae, who has an extremely high damage multiplier on his 3 skill points enhanced attack, Fulgurant Leap. This makes other support buffs work much more effectively on Imbibsa Lunae because he has a very strong baseline multiplier. Furthermore, a large portion of Jingliu's buffs will fall off once she exits the Spectral Transmigration state, whereas for other DPSs, they do not have such limiting conditions. And as for Jingliu's actual numbers and actual multipliers for her skills and damage, we will have to wait for her unit analysis, but for now, she's looking to be a very comfortable carry that can deal quite a high amount of damage without relying too much on external supports. Now, another speculations that players have is the release of her signature Lightcone. miHoYo recently officially released her Lightcone details, and CN players have an extremely positive outlook on this Lightcone, likely comparable to Sile and Jingyuan's Lightcone in terms of damage increase, but there is one catch that I'll explain later on. For players who are still unaware, this Lightcone increases the wearer's crit damage by 20%. Note that this 20% crit damage is lower than the traditional crit damage increase, such as Yanqing's 30% crit damage and Jingyuan's 36% crit damage on their Lightcones. However, this comes with an extremely good effect: Eclipse. When an ally gets attacked or loses HP, the wearer gains 1 stack of Eclipse up to 3 stacks. Each stack of Eclipse will increase the damage of the wearer's next attack by 14%, and at 3 stacks, an additional attack will be delivered that ignores 12% of the enemy's defense. This defense ignore is the same as defense reduction. This is an extremely powerful debuff that amplifies the damage the more the defense is reduced, and I'll be explaining this a little bit further down below. But anyways, this will make Jingliu's defense strat capabilities reach extremely high numbers once you pair her up with external defense down sources such as Pella, Quantum 4-piece, and Resolution Lightcone. So with all this being established, this Lightcone looks really good. There is one massive drawback, which is Eclipse will lose its stacks after a wearer uses an attack, and yes, this attack includes follow-up attacks. Because of this, it makes it very difficult for other destruction units to fully utilize this Lightcone, because they do not have the ability to drain the entire team's HP and instantly gain the 3 stacks for Eclipse. Now, without the 12% defense down, this will be a very substandard Lightcone that will likely perform worse than every other distraction Lightcone counterpart. So to put this into perspective, these are some of the damage comparison on Imbibitor Lunae's damage output between an S1 Jingliu Lightcone, S1 Imbibitor Lunae's Lightcone, and an S5 4 of Aeon, which is the Herta Shop's Lightcone. And just saying, this 4 of the Aeon Lightcone is really good for destruction units. As you guys can see from the table, Jingliu's signature Lightcone at 3 stacks only has a 1% higher damage output compared to Imbibitor Lunae using his signature Lightcone at 2 stacks, which is very easily obtainable, right? And as I have mentioned, it will be very difficult for other destruction units to actually fully utilize and grant the 3 stacks consistently before they have to use one of their attacks. One thing to note is that these does not include other external sources of defense down. This is strictly from one unit's damage output alone. So maybe if you were to include other units such as Pella, Resolution, as well as Quantum 4-piece effect, then Jingliu's Lightcone might deal a little bit more damage. But that being said, you still have to achieve the 3 stacks, right? If you cannot achieve the 3 stacks on Jingliu's signature Lightcone, then the effects is essentially really bad. And the limiting criteria is basically other destruction units cannot consistently achieve 3 stacks of Eclipse to fully make use of Jingliu's Lightcone. So while the damage increase should be extremely substantial for Jingliu herself, it can be very difficult for other destruction units to make use of it. Think of it like Sile and Jingyue's Lightcone increasing a unit's DPS by a very large margin, but Jingliu's Lightcone unfortunately is not as universal compared to the other 2 signature Lightcones. Now, for the last point of Jingliu's individual speculations, it's gonna be the Ice 4-piece versus the Quantum 4-piece. This is slightly related to the previous point based on the signature Lightcone's defense strat, but first, let's just see how much damage defense reduction gives to a DPS. As you guys can see from the table over here, the defense reduction from the beginning, like the first 10%, 20%, 30% is really small, but notice how each 10% has a higher and higher damage increase. From a mere 5.53% damage increase at the start, at the very first 10%, this number increasingly goes up to a whopping 20.81% damage increase for the final 90 to 100% defense reduction. And keep in mind, this increase in damage is the final damage output. It is not a damage percentage buff like Bronya's skill or Team's ultimate. This is the final damage output. As such, it will be in the player's best interest to stack on as much defense strat as possible, not just for Jingliu, but for any DPS units, right? You really want to stack on as much defense reduction, which is why nowadays, especially in MOC 10, in the very first wave, against the wave with 2 fishes, it is very likely for players to just stack on like 100% defense reduction and just see some crazy high damage multipliers because of defense reduction. But for Jingliu, this is going to be a lot more relevant since her Lightcone is the only one so far that can give us defense reduction. So exactly how much do 4-piece Quantum's effect benefits Jingliu, right? So first we got to take a look into this consideration. If we were to pair Pella with Jingliu, so if we were to equip Pella with the Resolution Lightcone, this will place the defense reduction to 56% at a level 10 Pella's ultimate trace as well as an S5 resolution. Using Jingliu's signature Lightcone adds on another 12%, which brings the defense reduction to 68%. And finally, this Quantum's 4-piece effect here, the final 10%, will translate into a roughly permanent 13% final damage increase, going up to almost 30% if it is against a Quantum enemy, since the defense reduction is now at 20% instead of 10%, which brings it from 78% to an 88% defense reduction. That is miles better than 10% ice damage and 25% crit damage for 2 turns. Also, another note, why do I say this is a permanent uptime? It is because for Pella, it is very likely to just maintain this 100% defense down uptime, since if you guys build Pella right, she should be fast enough to constantly use her ultimates and just have 100% debuff coverage. Another thing to consider away from the actual natural damage output is that Ice domain is generally not a very efficient domain to spend a stamina in, because very little units actually make use of those sets compared to Quantum domains, Genius and Wuthering sets, both of which can be used by your DPS, your sustain and your support. On the other hand, the Ice set is mostly used for Ice DPS, and we really have a very limited amount of Ice DPS such as Yanqing and Herta, and nowadays Jingliu, while the Wind set's 4-piece effect can only be fully utilized by units with extremely fast ultimates such as Pella's ultimate or Silverwolf's ultimate when you have her equipped with tutorials Lightcone. Not to mention, other Wind DPS only really want the 2-piece Wind damage, and they will most often substitute the other 2-piece with either Musketeer or Hackerspace, because the Wind 4-piece effect is honestly just not that great if the unit cannot cast their ult frequently. That being said, with all this established, if a player were to not have defense shred sources such as Pella, Resolution Lightcone or Jingliu Signature Lightcone, or if they're against stages that don't even have the fishes that inflict defense down when they die, then the Ice 4-piece effect will definitely outperform the Quantum 4-piece effect. For now, due to team composition and enemy differences, CN believes that there isn't exactly a clear winner 100% of the time, but both sets are extremely viable. Ice set is a lot more universal, you can just bring it up to any stage, anywhere with any team, and it will definitely perform, while Quantum set should be able to provide players a much higher damage output when you pair Jingliu up with Pella, Resolution Lightcone as well as Jingliu's Signature Lightcone. Personally for me, as long as the 68% defense down can be achieved, since I will be using Pella, Resolution Lightcone as well as Jingliu's Signature Lightcone, then I would choose 4-piece Quantum over 4-piece Ice. Now moving on to the team speculations, Jingliu's team compositions are a lot more flexible than other DPS hyper carries such as Sile, Jingyuan and Imbibitor Lune due to reasons I mentioned in her damage comparison. Most notably, Crescent Transmigration allows Jingliu to drain the entire team's health in exchange for a higher attack percentage. So coupling this with her other self-buffing mechanics, the main objective will be to maintain Jingliu's spectral transmigration state as much as possible while granting buffs and debuffs during this window of opportunity for Jingliu to deal tremendous amounts of damage. So let's first think about some of the possible team comps that we would be running with Jingliu, starting with Sustain. Now with regards to Sustain, usually I would say most DPSers don't really mind what kind of Sustain they use, but Jingliu unfortunately would probably require a much higher demand for healing output due to her draining the entire team's health bar, right? To ensure that our team does not reach dangerous levels of health, a constant healing to combat Jingliu's health drain would be ideal. A unit such as Luocha and Bailu naturally comes into mind. Jepart's team-wide shield is also really good, and Fu Xuan's damage mitigation / damage distribution is also viable. However, Fu Xuan's damage mitigation and distribution, it is not really as consistent compared to healing, right? Fu Xuan's kit is more like delaying the damage you receive for as much as possible and just killing the enemy before they can actually kill your team. So her healing or the shields is definitely not going to be as high compared to Jepart, Luocha or Bailu. And for Jingliu, if Fu Xuan's ultimate healing cannot keep up with this, then Fu Xuan's viability will be lower compared to Jepart, Luocha or Bailu. With regards to the 4-star sustains such as March 7th, Natasha, Lynx and Fire MC, because they generally have a lower multiplier since the start, and some of their skills are generally just more skill point intensive, and their ultimates might not provide as much sustained value such as shields or team-wide heals, they may have difficulties solo sustaining Jingliu's team if Jingliu is draining too much HP from the entire team. Although if players have a very strong relic investments on your sustains, such as March 7th having 3000 defense, Natasha having like 5 to 6000 HP with outgoing healing, then they should still be able to suffice. But for new players, I think that you will definitely find more comfort when running Jingliu with sustains such as Luocha, Bailu and Jepart. Now moving on to the sustain, let's first talk about the debuffers, because Jingliu generally benefits much more from debuffers than buffers. Why? Because of action value advance. It means that you reach your turn sooner, but this also means that the buffs applied on your unit, it expires faster as well. So generally speaking for Jingliu, debuffers will work much better than buffers, right? So because of this, let's first talk about the two debuffers we have in the game. That's going to be Pella and Silverwolf. Pella is likely going to be a staple, very accessible for the free-to-plays, especially if Pella has E4 with the Ice Rest down. And Pella has been appearing in so many banners nowadays that I believe that most players should have a single copy of Pella, right? Her AoE defense now, as mentioned earlier, is going to be incredible and enables Jingliu to run a 4-piece Quantum for tremendous damage output. These same points can also be applied for Silver Wolf. Furthermore, Silver Wolf also has a weakness implant, which will expand Jingliu's flexibility when it comes to the content that you can use Jingliu in, right? For example, if you guys want to build like a mono ice team, like Japard, Jingliu, and Pella, and then just throw in a Silver Wolf, and then Silver Wolf can just always mark ice weakness if she's against a Quantum enemy. On the other hand, you could also run a 2+2, right? Silver Wolf with Fu Xuan and Jingliu plus Pella. This is also a very viable choice. So as you can see here, Silver Wolf's universal strength is once again being demonstrated. When it comes to other supports, like I mentioned, typically Jingliu prefers debuffers more than buffers, but Bronya and Tingyun will have an edge over Asta and Yukong. Bronya's extra turn is naturally an excellent mechanic, while Tingyun's energy battery can potentially allow Jingliu to cast multiple ultimates during her spectral transmigration state for tremendous damage output. Keep in mind, Bronya's extra turn, Jingliu may have difficulties getting the full benefit from Bronya's buff, since her extra turn buff only lasts for a single time, right? So there may be moments where Jingliu doesn't really get the full benefits of Bronya's buff, very similar to how Jingyuan's Lightning Lord does not get the benefit from Bronya's buff as well. So one thing to keep in mind. But with that aside, one thing in common between both Bronya and Tingyun is that they have very good damage percentage buffs, which is something that Jingliu appreciates more, since she does have her personal attack percentage buffs gained from draining the team's HP. Therefore, Asta and Yukong's attack buff, it is not as needed compared to damage percentage buffs. Furthermore, the crit ratio buffs from Yukong are also not as valuable due to Jingliu having her personal crit as well. One last thing before we wrap up today's content is gonna be an honorable mention, that is Blade. From the CN's perspective, the two of them, Jingliu and Blade, have an incredible synergy due to Jingliu's skill being considered as a damaging skill when draining Blade's HP. This will allow Blade to trigger more of his follow-up attacks, trigger Longevous Disciples effect, as well as his signature Lightcone effect. Not to mention, Blade has an incredibly high health pool, which directly benefits Jingliu's attack percentage increase, since this attack percentage increase is based on how much HP is drained from the team. And since Blade has very high HP, then there is more HP drained for Jingliu. So running Blade alongside with, for example, Luo Cha for ample healing, as well as a very tanky Pella to implement AoE defense down, which will benefit both Jingliu and Blade. This might see some very interesting results when it comes to team building. As to whether this team will perform well, if not even better than the traditional hyper carry setups, we will have to wait and see, and only time will tell. And with that, we've come to the end of today's CN Hypewatch. If you guys would like to engage in further discussions, feel free to join my Discord, Pokke's Village, where we have a very active community talking about Honkai Star Rail on a daily basis. If you guys would like to check out my stream, that's going to be twitch.tv/MrPokke. I'm streaming almost every single day, and the schedule will be uploaded on Discord as well. With that, we've come to the end of today's content. All the best for Jingliu Poos, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care.